Okay, thank you everybody for joining us today. I really appreciate it. I wanted to start with who we are. We've got myself, Cheryl Ball. I am the editor-in-chief of the library publishing curriculum, and you can reach me on Twitter at that address, the S2CE Ball. And joining me is Kaycee White, who's an intern with us in the Digital Publishing Collaborative at Wayne State University Libraries this semester. She's been working on the library publishing curriculum, helping me with it all semester long, both in person and remotely. And so Kaycee's going to talk a little bit later about some of the work that she's done on the curriculum as she's been revising it. You know, we've been wearing these earbuds all week and my ears are just like done with it. Okay. So if you are unfamiliar with the curriculum, or you want to take a look at it while we're talking through some of the parts and where it's been and where it's going, you can go to this bit.ly. It's bit.ly/LPC-curriculum, I guess. So Kaycee, if you can write that in the Q&A, that'd be great. Okay. All right, thank you. Now let's try it and see if I can figure out how to do polls in Zoom. Let's see. Here we go. Poll time. Launch poll. Hey, I think I did it right. So how many of y'all have used the library publishing curriculum in some form or fashion, or not at all? I'll let this run for a second. It's pretty cool for those of you who've been watching other people run the polls behind the scenes. I get to see the answers sort of in real time to see how many people have voted. Y'all are probably all familiar with that, but I use the cheap version of Zoom and haven't had that capability before, so I'm kind of excited to see how it's running. Okay, great. We've got, let's see, I think this will show you what the answers are. If I hit end poll and share results, then I believe you can see it. Does that look good? So a lot of you are brand new to the curriculum, which is fantastic. So I'll spend a couple of minutes reviewing what it's about, and then then Kaycee and I will both talk about some of the changes that we've been doing on the curriculum and improvements that we have planned for it over the next couple of years. Okay, so let me stop that. And we'll move to the next slide. Okay. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the curriculum, the Educopia Institute and the Library Publishing Coalition, in partnership with the Public Knowledge Project, NASIG, and Blue Sky to Blueprint, worked on the library publishing curriculum through an IMLS grant several years ago. And the curriculum is a suite of synchronous and asynchronous professional development offerings for librarians. They're open and free under a CC BY license for anyone to offer or to adapt. And again, they're listed at that link that Kaycee posted. This is a dynamic, extensible multimedia curriculum, and it's intended to empower librarians to meet local demands to launch or enhance scholarly publishing activities. So one of the things that I really like about it is, like, if you are a librarian or even a library student, not yet a librarian, or somebody who's library adjacent and you know kind of nothing about publishing, but you've been tasked with doing some publishing stuff for some reason, or you're just interested in learning, this curriculum is absolutely the place to start. So the project team piloted more than a dozen workshops and courses based on the curriculum when they put out a call for people to author different sections of it. And there's also an asynchronous virtual workshop that's posted as part of the curriculum now that Educopia Director Dr. Catherine Skinner created and has user tested through teaching it in iSchools and stuff. And that's also freely available for anybody who wants a different take on, like, how are you going to teach the modules. So the curriculum was released in 2018. Let's see. With 4 modules, as you can see there. It includes the major competencies in library publishing: content, impact, policy, and sustainability. Each module has been authored by field experts, from one author, John Warren, who wrote the entire impact module, which is massive and super complete and like amazing and like sort of overwhelming too. You'll learn a lot. And that was the area that I call it overwhelming because it was the area I knew least about. So it's super helpful. To dozens of authors on some of the other modules, including the other three. So each of the modules is roughly the equivalent of a 12-hour course. You can kind of break it up that way. Oops. Now, each module contains an introduction plus 4 to 6 units that address different topics of interest. And within each unit, there's the following components that are listed here on the slide. So you can use it in a physical or a virtual classroom, or as a workshop, or as a course, sort of however you want, because it's CC BY, right? We encourage whatever kind of use that you can come up with. So that's been the building and the publishing of the curriculum in its original instantiation that happened between 2016 and 2018. And then in 2019, one of the outcomes of the curriculum project and the grant project was to hire a new editor-in-chief. That's me. And then to plan for an editorial board. And there's a couple outcomes that we have related to that. So I'm going to talk about a couple of those things and what's been going on more recently with the curriculum. Let's see. Oops. Okay. So, oops. As I said, I was named the new editor-in-chief last, I think it was September, last August or September, and I've been working very closely with Melanie Schlosser, at LPC, to figure out how we can focus on the second bullet point in particular: establish and oversee the move of the curriculum from its current online home, which is a Google Docs, to LPC's website. And in addition to that, we've also been working a lot on the formation of the inaugural Curriculum Editorial Board, which will be separate than LPC's advisory board. I'm gonna talk more about the editorial board in just a second. But part of my job is also to advocate for the curriculum, to be an ambassador for it, to figure out ways that I can collaborate potentially with the professional development committee or the research committee through LPC, as well as plan other kinds of outreach for the curriculum across different constituencies. And through that outreach, sort of gathering information that I can help take to the editorial board, the new editorial board, on developing proposals for modifying, updating, reinvigorating, changing the method of delivery for the content that we already have. And in particular, we are certainly interested in what the global impact of that will be. And I'll talk briefly about that in a couple minutes. So that was sort of the first point of order for one of the post grant period sustainability outcomes, was hiring the new EIC. And I serve a 3-year term, I think it's renewable. We'll see if I do a good job, if I still like it in a couple of years. And that coincides with the editorial board, the inaugural editorial board, which is kind of an exciting thing. So as part of this work, we're now soliciting calls for editorial board applications. And I will return to that process at the very end of this presentation for any of you who might be interested in that. But the editorial board will be helping me identify the work that's needed, recruiting and guiding project participants in terms of whether we get external people to author revisions, or whether the board members take it on themselves is an option, whether we need to find additional funding, or whether there's some internal funding for that. So all of those kinds of decisions that are listed here, as well as doing some of the ambassadorial work with curriculum promotion. So this is a really important new step for the curriculum to have this board, because it can't just be me and Melanie and Kaycee making stuff up. Which is not what we've been doing so far, but like we've been taking liberties and saying, okay, this needs to happen, and this needs to happen in terms of solidifying the curriculum and making sure that it's archived and things like that. And that's the next point that I want to talk about. So one of my main priorities for the first 2 years of this editorship is to move the curriculum to keep it on the Google Docs version that is currently linked from the Educopia website, but to establish a more permanent version of it on the LPC website. And we have not gotten very far with this particular project, in part because we decided to sort of spin it off into a couple of, we're not just moving it one-to-one. We're spinning it off into a couple of sub-projects that we've been working on. So we don't have something to say today that's like, here it is on the LPC website yet, but we're in the midst of that. And of course, we have technical considerations to deal with, the difference between Google Docs and the WordPress installation that LPC uses for their website, as well as who do we want, how do we want users to engage with the online curriculum as it will sit on the LPC site. And those are some of the bigger, more UX challenging kinds of things that we're dealing with, that we were sort of in the midst of dealing with when the COVID pandemic happened. So with all intents and purposes, I went to Oslo for the IFLISIG library publishing meeting the first week in March, which probably none of us should have gone to because of the pandemic and we didn't know. Came back, self-quarantined, and I haven't been to the office since February 28th. So I feel like a little even more behind on some of this migration work that I had intended to work on. So I know we're all in the same boat where that's concerned. So I know that that work will be coming in more intensity over the summer and the fall, especially as the editorial board is brought on board in late summer. So moving the curriculum, though, is a high priority for this work over the next year. As part of that move, in consultation with LPC, we decided that we needed to archive a version of the curriculum as it exists on Google Docs. And so this is sort of the primary version, right? The prime version. And in order to do that, through discussions with Melanie and other folks at Educopia and the LPC board, board members, we decided with also the consultation of my fantastic colleague, Joshua Neds Fox at Wayne State, that we would create a digital commons version of the curriculum, downloading all the originals from Google Drive as Word docs and creating a single issue journal structure within Digital Commons, which is the BPress IR that we're using right now at Wayne State, to host the original 4 modules. And then as we have future content, we can upload that as new issues within the journal. And for that, we'll include stuff like Dr. Skinner's virtual modules that she used for the classes, as well as a linear PDF version of the curriculum that we're working on. We'll talk more about that in a second too. That's what Kaycee's going to focus on. After that, some of the other things that we're working on are creating the new use cases for how people might interact with the website version of the curriculum, as well as a more linear version. And this linear version idea came to us as we were discussing what potential use cases there might be. And part of it was, in anecdotally talking to folks in the library publishing community and through my own experiences with using the curriculum. And as many of y'all said in the poll, you've skimmed it, right? But you don't necessarily know it completely. It's because there's so much there. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around how big it is. Because and Kaycee can confirm this because she's printed out every page. It's massive. And there are some redundancies between the narratives and the instructor's guides and the slides because of the different delivery mechanisms that we wanted people to be able to engage in it with the Google Drive version, which has everything listed. So we decided that sort of we thought it would be a quick and dirty project to create a PDF version of the book. And I've got a link here, the bit.ly/LPF-curriculum. Oops. I can't read it because my slides are in the -curriculum-draft. Kaycee, if you want to put that in the chat too, then people can click on that. Thank you. And see, this is a draft of one part of the policy module, the copyright policy. module in sort of a linear form that incorporates information from the instructor's manuals and the slides sort of into a single document that can hopefully stand alone. And our goal with that was to figure out was to create an artifact that would be able to be downloaded as a single document and used either from an individual person's perspective or in a classroom setting, something like that. And we plan to do that with the entire curriculum. Kaycee is going to talk a little bit about that process next. Let's see. Here we go. So to give a little context for the work that she's been doing, we are both working in Wayne State University Library System's Digital Publishing Collaborative, which is our sort of publishing unit within the library. And one of the focuses that we have within the Publishing Collaborative is on publishing pedagogy. So we focus, given my background in teacher training and teaching digital writing and digital editing and publishing, I wanted to continue focusing on that when I came to the library system. And so we've been trying to craft and hone a collection of what types of workshops and webinars and face-to-face things we might do in relation to teaching people how to publish, teaching scholars how to publish. And of course, the library publishing curriculum fits right into that because it's about teaching librarians how publishing might work within their own institutions and how they might engage with faculty members and also with students who are doing this kind of work. So scholars of any form, how do we teach them how to do this work? So it was a natural fit for us to be working on the LPC curriculum at Wayne State. And then Kaycee came along in January from the English department, as you probably saw from the intro slide. And I thought she was a PhD student when she showed up. I have to tell this story because she seemed so smart and so poised. And I was introducing her to one of the other graduate student assistants who's in the library school. And I said, oh, Kaycee, what are you, you're a PhD student, right? And she's like, no. And I was like, oh, a master's student, okay. And she's like, no. And I was like, oh my God, you're an undergraduate student? I had no idea. I had somehow missed that in all the communications that we had up until the day that she started. But she's blown me away with her editorial skills, and I think you'll be impressed with some of the work that she's done. And she's helped us think about how we're doing onboarding, and we've been working with some of the other GSAs on materials on how do you get students into the library system and into library publishing in a way that makes sense when you only have a semester or so to do it. So at this point, I'm gonna turn the presentation over to Kaycee so she can tell you about what she's been working on with the draft.
Well, hello everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Hopefully I can live up to the poise description that Cheryl just gave me. So let's see. For this editing of the curriculum, I did, as Cheryl said, I printed everything out, which is my favorite way to edit anything. And I did 2 original passes on the paper. So the first pass was just me sitting at the desk, writing all of my edits out on the papers themselves in multicolored. I like color coding things. So I started with all of the instructor guides, and I laid them all out for one module. So depending on the module, there's somewhere between 4 to 7 units in each one. So I was able to start, go back, thank you. I actually started with the last module because that's what Cheryl gave me, and I didn't think about inquiring as to why I starting with the last one. And I started, and I made sure that all of the instructor guides looked the same. There were some small little usage details that were not the same, little tiny redundancies that I took, and I fixed those within the instructor guide, because I had never done anything like this before. And then I went into the narrative. So I went through, and I originally just read the narrative, trying to figure out what the heck was going on, since I had just came into this like 2 days before, and I really had no idea what digital publishing was. And I just tried to use organization as my key for this. So I would line up what slides and activities with what parts of the narrative. And then I would write in, say like insert slide number here, and go through and have like a rough idea of where I was going to put them when I actually went through and edited on Teams online. It's a really good thing we started using Teams, since when we started this, we were still in the office, and then the world ended. And I went to Florida, and then the week after, quarantined, and then the offices were closed. And I was like, thank goodness we have everything on Teams, so we can all continue working on everything we're doing. I worked a lot on the placements, which were really a lot to have to think about, not knowing. Since I had no background in, let's say, copyright, I wasn't sure what was super important to have, but I looked at it from a student's perspective. Since I am an undergrad, I have 3 classes left. I looked at it from a perspective of what I would want to have. So let's say like key terms. That's always something that if I'm taking notes, I want that to be right at the forefront. So a lot of the stuff I did was like, it's already in the narrative, but if it was in the slides in a different way, I would put it in as like an insert. So key terms, or just important things that were bolded, which again, I don't know if that's, I didn't know at that time if that was super important, because I don't actually know anything about copyright other than what I've learned in this. But it seemed like the good plan from a student's perspective. That's really how I looked at this. And then on my second task, can you click the next slide, please? Okay. And then once I was done with all of that, I went module by module. So then on my second task, and I started from the first unit, and then went first through the last. And then on my second task through, I started at the back and worked my way forward. This way I know that once I got back to the first one, if there was something that came up, I would know that if it came up in one of the last ones and it said to be referred to in, let's say, unit 2, and it wasn't, I would know to go back and add that in. Obviously, that's not something I would have known going through the first time going through forward. So I thought going through backward too was just a good way to do it. I also inputted, so this was inputting the changes that I made on the paper into the computer. This is also where I did any additional reorganization. Some of the times I would have a slide in a place, and then I would read through it again and say, well, actually it's better off going here, because now that I've read further into this, I know that all of this is actually connected. And some of the times I realized that the slides weren't what I thought was important, ended up not being important, as important, and it didn't need to be like highlighted in that way. That was my plan.
Trying to figure out how to unmute myself again.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for that, Kaycee. I asked her too as part of this, in part because the Publishing Collaborative is so interested in publishing pedagogy, and also because I know folks at the Library Publishing Forum are interested in internships and how these processes work. So I wanted to add in this extra slide where Kaycee and I can just chat very quickly about some of her motivations and lessons learned behind this process, this project, in addition to the process that she just talked about. And we will stop in a minute and take questions for this part of the presentation before we move on to some of the other aspects that I wanted to get to at the end. So Kaycee, I figured we would just do this in a dialogue format. Why were you interested in a publishing internship to begin with?
When I was a freshman in high school, I had this one English teacher who, I think it was the first time I ever realized how organized grammar is, which kind of sounds weird because a lot of the rules don't always apply. But I really liked the organization of it, and I decided that I thought that's what editing was, just saying like, hey, a comma is not in the right spot. So about 10 years ago, I decided, hey, I want to do publishing because I thought it was all about commas. I later realized it wasn't actually that, but I see that's what the next question is.
Yeah, and that's a pretty typical, I mean, like when I teach editing, I stopped teaching copy editing as the first part and started teaching developmental editing because the students come in and they're like, we have our red pens at the handy. And I'm like, no, that's just such a small part of what editing is.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the whole process. So yeah, how did you learn about what publishing actually is?
Since I was so interested in it, I watched a lot of YouTube videos that book editors had done. And I have a friend named Annie Spence who put out a book a couple years ago with Flatiron Books. And her literary agent was nice enough to actually spend some time talking to me at Annie's book launch, and give me some like insight into what the world actually is, which was so nice of her.
That is very, very nice. It's very helpful to have that kind of time and mentorship. There was a mentorship panel earlier today. I don't know if you got to see it, but that's librarians do that too with each other to help themselves figure out what publishing is, which is really nice. Okay, so what expectations did you have coming into this internship, knowing originally you were trying to maybe intern with the university press, but they were having some changes that didn't allow for that, so you came to us instead, which I was super grateful for?
I had zero expectations because I had no idea what I was getting into. I thought when the advisor for the English department internships said there's one at Purdy Library, I said, oh great, a library, because I've volunteered at libraries from when I was 11 to when I was 18, and then when I graduated from high school I started working as a library assistant, and I still work at a library in my area today. So I was like, okay, cool, another library to add to my resume, but I had no idea what I was doing. And I came in the first day and Cheryl was so nice to explain everything to me. And I'm sure I looked very lost, but she was
obviously
so
not, because I thought you were a PhD student. So when we talked about the library publishing curriculum project to begin with, what did you think about it?
I was generally very excited. To be able to have learning of what I was actually doing. I figure a good way to learn about what you're doing is to do it. And since the curriculum was literally what we were doing, like the job, the field, that seemed like a good plan. Plus, I knew that it wasn't a lot of, it was going to be more organization than it was going to be formation. So I think that helped me be more okay with it, like not so stressed, I suppose.
Oh, didn't you just mention something to me at one point? You're like, I'm so glad this job is more about editing than writing.
Yes. Yeah, I don't really like writing. I'm a bad English student in that way, but
the secret is nobody actually likes to write.
Yeah.
We just like the glory of having written something.
I understand that. I just finished my senior thesis and I was really happy when it was done. Not so much writing it.
So do you have a better idea of what library publishing is now, and would you be able to explain it to some other intern who might be interested?
I do believe I could. I do have definitely more than zero idea, which is what I started with. I could muddle through a paragraph on what it is. I don't know if it would be great or if it would be super accurate. But I could definitely try.
All right, we're going to work on that before you graduate next week. And then, right.
Oh, cool.
So finally, then, what lessons did you learn from the editing process?
I think the greatest lesson I learned was that everything, even if you're editing something, you're still developing what you're doing. So I did 2 passes because I realized that what I did with the first pass wasn't what I particularly wanted it to be. So learning as you're going is fine. I think that's really the best one.
Yeah, I love project-based work in that way, because then you can learn and we can talk about it as you go through, which is really nice that we had sort of these weekly touchstone meetings about like, okay, what questions do you have? How is it progressing? Things like that. But yeah.
We've had a lot of questions.
Which is good. Next time we'll start with
nicely written.
That's right. All right, thank you for that. Oops. Now, woo, poll time. Let's see if I can do this poll again. One of the issues that Kaycee and I came up with as we were doing sort of, after she had done her 2 drafts and then sent it to me, and I went through sort of a 3rd draft of the narrative and the instructor's guides, which she had edited separately but combined in certain ways where it made sense to with the slides, was I don't think we actually need a linear version of the instructor's guide. It works really well in terms of making it accessible for workshops and sort of face-to-face interactions where the instructor might be going in relatively, like they might know the curriculum but not super know it, like it might be a colleague teaching another set of colleagues about it. But when it came to sort of this print-like thing that we were working on and that Kaycee spent most of her time on, I was like, you know, I don't think we actually need the instructor's guide. So we created a poll to hopefully, let's see if I can figure out how to get to it. There we go. And whether you imagine some version of the guide might still be necessary. And this will be hard, I know, if you're not that familiar with the contents as it is, but we'll see. All right. Great news, Kaycee. We've got more work for you to do. It looks like people still want an instructor's manual to go with the print version of the guide. Here we go. 21-3 say yes, they want some version available. That is great to know. See, this is why I wanted to do this workshop, so that we could get feedback from everybody. So at this point, I'd love to stop for a moment, take questions for about 5 or so minutes that you might have for me or Kaycee about this part of the process so far in what we've been doing. Yeah. But we'll have a further Q&A in about 5 or 10 minutes. I want to make sure we hit some of the future initiatives that we have planned so that y'all, because some of them relate to y'all's questions as well. As I've been mentioning, the editorial board will be coming on board this July. I'm really excited about that. It's a little bit earlier than we had initially planned, but just because it fits in the timeline and we're ready to start getting that kind of feedback. So that process is in the works. We will be working on new models and revision ideas. So if you have stuff that you would like to see done, please share it in the chat today or email me or somebody from the Library Publishing Coalition. You can email Nancy at contact@librarypublishing.org and she can forward that information to me. We also want to try and work with related organizations and extend our audiences in some way. And some of this work is already happening also in relation to the 4th bullet point with creating globally diverse options and sort of doing a little bit of internationalizing of the curriculum, because it is a very US-centric curriculum right now. And some things translate and some things don't into other regions of the world. I know that Joshua Neds-Fox, again, my colleague, has been working closely with Reggie Raju from South Africa and some of his colleagues who are representative of the IFLA Library Publishing SIG, because they have an interest in creating a curriculum that is that targets more international regions, global regions, than what the LPC's curriculum currently does. So we're trying to figure out how we might work together in that capacity. And as an aside, and sorry, a little bit of a plug again for the Council of Editors of Learned Journals, which I also work on. That organization is trying to do some training with its editors. So it's a slightly different audience, but I think that audience overlaps just enough with library publishing units who are either taking on editorial responsibilities for journals, or working with faculty members and others and student scholars who are editors of journals. CELJ is a really interesting organization. We're trying to get them to partner, but they're still trying to wrap their heads around what library publishing is. So I'm working on that. But it's a good organization that also tries to do a lot of outreach, and I'm trying to figure out how we might relate the curriculum to what they're doing as well. So that's some of the future initiatives that we have planned over the next couple of years, and we'll see what we can get done in the next little while. And for folks who are interested in helping us with this, that's definitely part of the process of the editorial board. But it's poll time again. All right, this is a quick one about new audiences. Okay, there you go. So let us know which user group is the most important, in your opinion, for us to target with any future revisions that we might have of the curriculum. I was waiting to see if anybody was going to choose university presses. Okay, any more votes? Okay, let me share these results out to y'all. So overwhelmingly, of course, yes, let's stick with the current librarians and library staff, and then follow up with iSchool or MLIS instructors. It's interesting to me that MLIS students or CIS students, or whatever the degree program might be called, with what you're familiar with, didn't get any votes. And I'd be curious to hear from folks why that might be, generally speaking, because I know it seems to me that very few programs offer anything specific about library publishing in their curriculum. We learned about one the other day. I can't remember, it was I think at San Jose State. A woman was talking about the program there. So that's something that I'd be interested in hearing more from people, because that's definitely been an audience that we've been trying to target a little bit with the linear version of the curriculum. So if we're way off base, tell us now and we'll stop editing. Like, that's cool. I don't mind being wrong. All right, so let's see. Okay, now I get to finish with a pitch for please, please, please. If you're here at this session, if you're here at the Library Publishing Forum, you probably qualify to apply for the editorial board for the curriculum. This is an inaugural curriculum. These are some of the qualifications. You do not have to possess all of these qualifications, because that is kind of rare. If you have one or more, that's fantastic. And we need people who have strengths in each of these different quals. So please consider it. And the commitment is a 3-year term with possible renewal. You'll work 5 to 6 hours a month. We'll have regular board meetings that probably won't, they might be quarterly, they might be monthly. We haven't determined that yet, I don't think. And key is the LPC membership is not required. So I know we were in another session yesterday where somebody was saying, hey, can I join LPC as an individual member? And Melanie was like, it's really hard for us to navigate that. It's not really set up for that. Well, the good news is if you're here and you don't have, your school doesn't have an LPC membership, you are still qualified to serve on the editorial board. So we'll have a mixture of LPC members and non-LPC members. And part of that is because we need the breadth of knowledge that y'all have to share with this work. So how do you apply? A one-page statement and your CV. That's all you need. And you don't even have to apply yourself. Like if you know somebody, if you're like, I don't know, or I don't have time, and you know, but you're like, oh, but I want so-and-so to do this, then if you email that information to us by Sunday, like Monday morning, okay, it's fine, then we can solicit applications from folks who you think would serve as great editorial board members. But seriously, if you're here, if you're in this session, if you've been attending LPF this week, if you've done it for more than 1 year, you certainly should consider applying. Maybe getting to work with me sounds like a terrible idea, but I hope not. Kaycee can vouch for me. So I like to think that I make it fun and not too overburdensome, and really we get to think about, oh, what comes next, and how do we want to do that, and who do we want to tap, and how can we expand what we're doing to new audiences and new users and new authors who we haven't even thought of yet into new regions, and also use what other folks in other regions are doing to help improve our own work and vice versa. So think about it. Nominations are due Monday morning, Sunday night-ish. And applications are due May 22nd. These will be chosen at the June LPF board meeting and announced by July 1st. So I'm super excited about that.